It is difficult to believe that in the 1940s this beautiful lake and surrounding forest were created from what was once a surface coal mining operation. Giant machines extracted the coal from deep beneath the earth. But something was different about it all. Henry Hillman, the owner of the Harmon Creek Coal Company, was quietly saving topsoil and planning a reforestation and renewal program long before laws were enacted to protect the earth. He planned to create a recreation center for the people of the area to enjoy and a refuge for native animal species. Raymond Bologna, a coal mining operator, explains.
They started in the 40s, and you have to give them a lot of credit. In the 40s, there weren't very many laws, but Mr. Hillman, the owner of Harmon Creek, was at that time reclaiming land, planting trees, whatever the land could stand, and putting lakes in and vegetation and putting different type of animals and birds on the property. And he was ahead of his time. And there's only two people I know that did that. One was Mr. Hillman, and the second was a fellow from Weir in West Virginia, Mike Stravaggi. The name of the company was Penn Weir Coal Company.
Malcolm Morgan, director of the Washington County Council on Economic Development, sees a bright future for Hillman Lake.
And that's a long way away, but the lake's a couple of miles down through that woods over there. From here, we plan to totally redevelop it, put in a new dam and that sort of thing. As a matter of fact, there's some talk about doing, there's 3 valleys in that 1,000 acres to do like they've done in Japan and also in China. Some talk of some of the engineering people along that line. I think it's a great idea, a place for ducks to land and so forth.
Doug Dunkerly is a Pennsylvania Game Commission officer who has patrolled the park for some time now. He shares Mr. Morgan's enthusiasm for saving the lake and the surrounding forest, but for a different reason. We caught up with Doug on his day off and discovered that he is an expert on the flora and fauna of Pennsylvania. Let us spend the remainder of this program following Doug and Derek Comport, a frequent fisherman in the lake's waters, through the forests that Mr. Hillman had planted more than 50 years ago.
Yeah, if you see, that one might be right. They're almost overly extended when you're ready to pop. And they'll just, when the sun comes and hits them in the morning, is when they use it here. This will pop. And this is the natural antidote for poison ivy. It'll always grow in the same places where you'll find poison ivy. If you get poison ivy, you pull one of these things out by the root. Take this part down in here and smash it up in your hands, get the juice off of it, and rub it on there. And it'll take the oils out of the poison ivy that affect and break your skin. So when they're ready to go, like I said, when the sun hits them, they just naturally go. These ones right here. Called colt's foot. You can take this stuff, a lot of times it's found along roads and stuff. You can take this stuff and you can burn it. And when you burn it, you crumple it up and it seasons you very much like pepper will. Real good on a salad. It's like a freshwater, kind of like a freshwater celery, but real small, real crispy when you bite into it. There's a smaller version, which is probably about 1/8 that size. I'm not sure what there's another name of duckweed, but I'm not sure which one it is. But that's the regular duckweed, and the other one there's a smaller variety. And it's really kind of good to eat. And of course, if in a survival situation, it'd be great for you to have. And these are rushes. Rushes are round, sedges are wedges. And these rushes, of course, are a wetland predominant plant that you would have. And so you need to, if you're looking for wetland things, when they're designating wetlands, they look at if there's water there, if there's wetland plants, and then they look at the soils too. They have to be a hydrated soil. So when they're designating lots of things, but usually if you're around a wetland or a pond or something like that, you can usually find enough to eat. Of course, the many parts of cattails and stuff are edible. There's none here. There's an arrow-shaped thing. It's called duck potato, which actually has a potato on the end of it. We have a lot of those at the lake up at Taylorstown, which we actually planted. But that's what the Indians would grow. They'd grow these in the lakes, and in the fall they'd go and they'd go in their bare feet and break these little tubers off, kind of a purplish tuber, maybe about 2 or 3 inches long, about 1 inch in diameter. Very starchy, and they could store them all winter long and eat them. But that was one of the things. They'd go to these places and they'd break the tubers off with their feet, and they'd give them a source of starch in the wintertime.
Should we head around to this end, or?
That's the shell off of a pignut. Pignut is a member of the hickory family. Has a lot of very tough, thick shell, or thick hull on it, like you say, and a small nut which has a fairly hard casing on it too, and a very small nut inside. Usually most even squirrels and stuff don't even bother with it until later on in the winter time, because there's just so small of the value for getting it open. There's not much nut inside, where a hickory nut or a walnut or something like that is much more producive. But that's a pignut. What we see here is multiflora rose. This was a reintroduced species and kind of has become an invasive, and is actually listed as a noxious weed here. But it was the rose and the wild roses grow what are called, after they flower, they get a bulb on them here that's called rose hips. Very rich in vitamin C. Little red beads here that show up on here, and they're edible. Indians would eat these many years ago. They'd store them for the winter time for a really good source of vitamin C. You'll find them on all the rose bushes, and of course they usually show up and are much easier to find as the foliage and stuff starts to go off in the fall. You'll see more of them there. They're pretty persistent throughout the winter time too. Pheasants, turkeys, grouse, and all will eat those. A good source of food for them.
I saw a bass over there. Yep. Its head actually was kind of swirling.
Deer usually like the brand. This is a decorative, so this would have been something the Hillmans would have brought in, probably having around their park area, and that after not being maintained, it just grew up. But these are very popular around people's houses. Japanese yew, and it's one that deer just love to browse. That's probably why down to lower levels there's none of it left. It's all gone off. But they will just kind of grow out of control, so not controlled like a lot of hedge. But this is something you normally wouldn't find in the forest. Somebody would have to go out in the plant. It's a dead cherry tree. This is where they have this misshaped growth and things on here. You take that off and cut those things off. That's where you'll have a lot of the really wild-looking grain. It'll all be mixed in one another, and you'll get some absolutely gorgeous stuff for knickknacks. Very hard and very dense, where it repairs itself.
Bark's all worn.
Yeah, it's just dying. Dead for quite a while. You can see it, I said, the insulated and stuff, and this must have been like the main picnic area where they're doing wires and stuff down there. This is wild artichoke. I'm not sure if there's an artichoke underneath there somewhere or not. Deer will browse it or whatever. Very common. It's a very common plant in Pennsylvania. It's a native species here and grows. The other yellow one here is wild mustard. And actually get those seeds and grind them up, and actually they make mustard with them. It's wild mustard, but the seed's so small it would take a ton of them to make anything. Crab apples. An apple tree with little crab apples on it. And there again, songbirds. These are very persistent in the winter time. Creates winter food source for the seed-eating birds. This tree's loaded up pretty good.
My name is Fort Shankle. Thanks for tuning in. I would like to thank Doug and Derek for today's program. We hope we can do this again sometime. Thanks. Let us know what you thought.